morning. My name is Megan Edwards of Focus Communications, and today we're getting the latest updates from Eskay Mining, which trades on the Toronto Venture Stock Exchange under the symbol ESK. Joining me once again is Eskay's Vice President of Exploration, John DeDecker. John, thanks for stopping by to update us once again. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Megan. Thanks for having me back again.
So last week you announced completion of almost 30,000 meters of drilling across multiple VMS targets, including Jeff North, Scarlet Ridge, Scarlet Valley, and Tarn Lake. Can you run through the campaign and the preliminary highlights from these growing targets?
Yeah, certainly. I'll start off with our disclaimer. I'll be talking about forward-looking statements during this interview, and then getting to the point of our press release. We really focused a good bit on TV towards the latter part of the season. That's where we up drilling 29,500 meters in total between all the targets that you'd mentioned. And TV's one of the ones that was the most exciting target last year, and I would say it's come back this year and fulfilled that again. We've really stepped out a good bit at TV this year, where we've got quite a large fence of holes along strike throughout this larger area, roughly about a 300 meter strike length through here. And what we've found, particularly with some of the holes that are towards the center of this, is that we've hit the massive sulfide zone we discovered at the end of last year. We've shown that actually extends about 100 meters to the north of where we'd found it last year. And it's, roughly about 10 meters thick, but it's underlain by an additional 50 to 90 meters of more stockwork mineralization. So, most of this is to the east of our drilling last year, and that it really represents a significant step out in terms of volume of mineralization that we've encountered at TV. And a lot of this stuff, as I mentioned, is going to be a continuation of that upper massive sulfide zone that we found last year. It was quite silver rich. Some of our samples from last year came back with up to 5 kilograms of silver, and in the ballpark of about 5 to 10 grams per ton gold. The core that we got from this year looks very comparable to that we saw last year. So while we don't have assays for TV yet, I expect that we'll have very similar and hopefully better results from our drilling this year. Just showing you some of the drill core. This is what we've got. This core box that's over here on the left side of the screen. That's an example of some of the massive sulfide we intercepted. It's mudstone hosted and usually has a fault underneath it, which is interesting for trying to find more of this next year. And then we have some stockwork mineralization underneath this fault. But it's curious, this fault means that some of this may have been displaced and there may be more of this massive sulfide still waiting for us to find it at TV. And then again, with several of our other holes throughout this area, notably TV 22 111 and 109 hit considerable massive sulfide mineralization that our handheld XRF indicates is silver bearing, which is consistent with the massive sulfide that we found last year at TV. And as I mentioned, the stockwork zone, this is really what's feeding into TV. We've intercepted a lot of this silicified mudstone with sulfide mineralization. That would be on this top image here. And that's really the sort of mineralization that we hit last year on some of our longer intercepts, like TV 2163, 66, and 67 were actually very long intercepts of this type of stockwork mineralization. And we've hit a lot more of that this year, down dip from last year's drilling. So we're really excited to see what we're going to get from the assay lab as far as these this drill core at TV. It's really quite impressive looking. I would say TV, once again, out of the TV Jeff trend, seems to be where most of the action's going on. It's interesting at Jeff, we're starting to see more of a base metal component to to Jeff than we'd seen anywhere else on the property, with quite a bit of chalcopyrite and sphalerite and galena. So, we're starting to feel that this Jeff and Jeff North is more of a kind of a base metal typical type of VMS deposit, whereas TV is more precious metal enriched. That's something that a lot of research needs to be put into going forward, is to figure out exactly why some VMS are precious metal enriched and others aren't. That's actually something that nobody knows. So our team with Colorado School of Mines is going to be working on this question, and hopefully allow us to help vector going forward to more of these precious metal rich deposits. We've drilled at Tarn Lake. This was one of our new targets from this year. There were a couple of historic holes 500 meters and 1 kilometer south of where we drilled this year, but we were targeting a large outcrop of sulfide mineralization hosted by the Eskay rhyolite, which is the same rock unit that hosts the Eskay Creek deposit. And we actually saw quite a bit of silver mineralization in outcrop on the surface. So here's what we're looking at as far as our maiden drill program at Tarn Lake, where we're going over roughly a 400 to 500 meter strike length, targeting this large gossiness or kind of rusty oxidized area that's consistent with mineralization. So we targeted several of these feeder zones, as well as some of the sedimentary rocks that may host replacement style mineralization. And what we found here is that we do have a considerable amount of stockwork sulfide, some of it approaching semi-massive replacement style sulfide, which is what these photographs on this slide are showing. We also have a large component. Most of the holes have this disseminated pyrite, up to about 5% disseminated pyrite, just scattered throughout all the rock. And this is what we're really curious about, because we know on some of this more massive pyrite, when we hit it with our XRF, where we are getting a lot of pathfinder and silver concentration. We do not know, however, if this disseminated sulfide's precious metal bearing or not. That's what we're waiting on the assays for, but that could be significant if we see that this disseminated sulfide's also precious metal bearing. That would be a really big thing. But we're seeing all the indications at Tarn Lake that we have a VMS feeder system. It's most likely connected with the system that we did some mapping on, which is Scarlet Knob across from the glacier. It's probably actually kind of juxtaposed against each other by a fault, but they may indeed be the same stratigraphic horizon. So we're going to be exploring that more next year, but we're certainly seeing encouraging results from Tarn Lake, that we have more VMS, and particularly in this upper Hazelton group stratigraphy, only about 7 kilometers away from the Eskay Creek mine. And then Scarlet Valley, again, quite close to Tarn Lake and Scarlet Knob. We have, kind of 3 of these things all within about 1 kilometer of each other. And we're starting to see really interesting mineralization at Scarlet Valley as well. A lot of this, and I should note Tarn Lake as well, a lot of these are fed along these synvolcanic structures that are delineated by andesite dikes cutting through the rhyolite. That's just a fluid pathway that these VMS fluids could travel through on their way to the seafloor, and then they precipitate their replacement style mineralization closer to the seafloor surface. We're seeing similar sorts of replacement style mineralization and dike controlled mineralization at Scarlet Valley. And then here's kind of a map showing the drill traces that we did at Scarlet Valley. We're really focusing in on this andesite dike that was kind of this rusty colored patch of rocks through here, as well as just testing the stratigraphy through here, because a lot of this replacement style mineralization really hinges on the type of sedimentary rocks and really broken up rubble piles that these fluids can flow through and precipitate the metals between basically the rubble within these zones. So we're really trying to get a good handle on exactly what the most favorable horizons for replacement style mineralization, and really kind of, shunting these fluids from the dike and out into more laterally extensive mineralized horizons. That's really the big goal of a lot of this maiden drilling that we've done out there, is first get a feel for, do we actually have sulfide and precious metal mineralization? And then if we do, how are we going to vector towards the best horizons to target the maximum amount of tonnage? And what we're seeing at Scarlet Valley is we do indeed have a lot of these volcanic clastic debris flow deposits. That's what we're looking at on these slides. It's kind of a dark carbonaceous mudstone matrix with all of this volcanic clastic debris. It's just a bunch of fragments of rock dumped on the seafloor into this mud, but that actually provides a nice permeable conduit for these fluids to travel through and then start to precipitate out and replace the matrix. And that's what you see here, is all this sulfides actually replacing the black mudstone as well as some of these volcanic clasts. So this is exactly what we want to see. It's a good sign that we are getting subsea floor replacement style mineralization and quite intense hydrothermal alteration as well. So it's a good sign that we're on the right track out in these areas, which again have never been drilled before. So we're really getting our feel for what's going on out here. And this was the main focus of our mapping program as well. The mapping team has done a fantastic job looking at the lithology, structural geology, and collecting rock chip samples property wide, actually, which I could talk about that in a little bit. But we do have quite a number of samples of mineralization on the surface that we've assayed, and we'll be releasing those results as soon as we put together, a big story explaining this whole district that we're looking for right now. And again, we also see, in addition to this replacement style mineralization, we've got a lot of stockwork style mineralization focused more into these andesitic type rocks at Scarlet Valley, which we see here. And that's again something we're seeing at Tarn Lake. That's very similar to what we see at TV. It's just the basics of VMS system. That's kind of how these things work, is with these fluids coming up these structures that dikes and other volcanic rocks exploit as well. So it's really enlightening to see these VMS showings on the surface, and then extrapolating what we're seeing there to a place like TV, where it's all underneath vegetation, or even elsewhere on the property. So we're really excited about what we're seeing property wide now. And this is a fantastic image of replacement style sulfide mineralization. You can see the sulfides are basically infilling between all these fragments of andesite, and you can also see the andesites being altered. That's what these white rims around these clasts represent, is the clay alteration associated with these VMS fluids. So that's really what we want to see. So we've certainly hit VMS mineralization. Now the big question is, and I know that's the question everybody wants answered, is how much gold do we have? I'll say that we are still waiting on some of our assays. We do have some back. We will be releasing them, but we are putting together a bigger picture story, since we are really looking at large trends of these VMS systems. We need to show where the best stuff is, which I can say right now, TV is hands down really, really good looking. I also am quite excited about Tarn Lake. And then we're going to be looking at some of these other deposits and seeing how we can vector towards more intense mineralization. And that's the sort of story that we'll be releasing here within the next few weeks. We just need, we're right at the end of the season. It's been a very busy season, and now we have to get to work over the winter. That's really when the science happens, and when we start planning things for next season.
And now you mentioned a number of other targets in the release where your team has completed prospecting and sampling in this campaign. Could you discuss these areas and perhaps what the 2023 exploration program may look like for the company?
Yes. So I would say, we pretty much finished off TV and Jeff. There may be a little return to TV because we're still, we're hitting some pretty good stuff at TV, but we really want to cast a wider net for the whole property. We have several VMS showings, such as Cumberland and SIB, and then, of course, everything that we see at Scarlet Ridge, Valley, and Tarn Lake. All of these things need to be followed up on, particularly SIB and Cumberland, some of the stuff that hasn't been drilled. There's a lot of things that could be followed up on there. So we've done some field work in each of these areas to, and make a better plan for next season. And then I would say our biggest focus for the mapping program will be on the Vermilion area. That big trend of really, really intense Bleg anomalies that we have in the south part of the property. We've just spent about the last week out there looking at that area. And, I've been thinking about this for a while, but our team, our mapping team, myself, Doctors Samuel Pierre, Ben Fryman, and Jesse Hill, and I have been talking about the possibility of there actually being orogenic gold system in the southern part of the property. A lot of times you'll find orogenic gold associated with VMS because it, typically will form a very similar environment where the VMS happens first. These continental island arcs collide into the continent, smash everything up, and form these orogenic gold deposits. And what we're seeing in the south part of the property is very encouraging for that. We've got a lot of precious metal bearing quartz carbonate veins in the south. And that this is based on historic rock chip samples. And we've gone through and followed up on as many of these really high grade samples as we could. And in every case, these were associated with quartz carbonate, manganese oxide veins, which we had assayed some of them last year as well, and they did come back with gold and silver. So this year we really got out the mapping team with our drone, and we're looking at the areas that have the highest vein densities. But it's incredibly exciting because we have all the recipe, basically all the makings for an orogenic gold deposit, where we've got our green schist metamorphic rocks, and we have first order fault structures, second order and third order structures, all of which are hosting quartz veins. So that's where we're going next year. We're going to be continuing to explore more VMS, but we're also going to be starting to look at the potential for orogenic gold in the south part of the property. So it's going to be quite exciting.
And a question on all investors' minds: are you able to give those watching a rough idea on when we should start to see results from the 2022 campaign?
Yeah, I'd say, by the time I get home and have a little bit of a break, sometime in the early part of November, hopefully, we'll be releasing stuff, and we'll have a preliminary interpretation on what we've been doing this season as well. And as everybody knows, I can get quite technical, and I will be giving some very technical talks as well once we have all of these results, and then we can explain what the significance of everything is.
And now that you've spent the last 4 months on the project, where you've expanded targets and discovered new areas of mineralization, could you wrap us up with what excites you about the campaign?
Yep. Well, I would say a lot of our vectoring based on just the science and understanding VMS deposits has panned out. We've certainly found new VMS showings. I'd say at Jeff North, while this appears to be, just based on looking at the core, you can see it's a base metal rich system. So there's potential for more base metal or traditional typical type VMS showings. TV, again, has just really gotten a lot fatter this year from what we were able to drill last season, is showing very similar styles of mineralization in the same host rock. So I'm very excited about TV. Tarn Lake again, just by the fact that it's at that Eskay Creek horizon and we are seeing such pervasive alteration mineralization is exciting. And I'm excited about this Vermilion and C10 area because, you know, whereas we were approaching it as more of a VMS system previously, I think we have VMS overprinted by orogenic gold, and that will change our exploration strategy somewhat. So I'm really excited about the property-wide prospectivity. And again, now we just have to wait for the assays and see what everything's going to look like. But it's quite a large property with quite a large number of showings, and we're starting to really get a good idea of what's going on property-wide now. And we'll just continue that work next year.
Excellent. So we'll have to have you on lots more next year too.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, John, thank you so much for keeping us updated during this drilling season, and we will talk to you very soon.
Thank you.